Hi everyone, and welcome to the Studio to Stage podcast. This is a place where we bridge vocal pedagogy and performance from private studio to curtain call. My name is Hannah Paul, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a musical theatre performer and singing teacher based in Meanjin, Australia. I am so glad to have you here today. In today's episode, I'll be giving you a crash course on all things transgender voices. We'll walk through the ever-changing opportunities and challenges for trans singers in musical theatre, how transition can affect the voice, and I'll give you some actionable steps that you can take to make your studio as safe and inclusive as possible for transgender and gender diverse singers. If you had to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how confident you are teaching transgender and gender diverse singers, what would you rate yourself? Take a second to think about that. I think before I started researching this topic, I might have been a 4 out of 10. Definitely not very confident, and the research shows that I'm not alone feeling unsure and intimidated. In fact, while most educators have a positive attitude towards teaching transgender students, things like a fear of offending others and a lack of training or experience hold a lot of teachers back from offering their services to this demographic. The good news is that I am feeling so much more confident working with these singers after doing all the research for this podcast, so I know for a fact that you are going to be feeling so much more confident after listening. Before we go any further, it's important to note that as a cisgendered woman, I do not have first-hand experience with the struggles of transgender and gender diverse people. While I read the research and see friends of mine facing the world through this lens, it's not one that I'll ever be able to fully step into. Which is why I'm so excited to bring on fellow Brisbane creative Mikey Searle, who'll be able to help us understand the perspective a little bit better. We'll be hearing from him later on in the podcast, so please stick around to hear what he has to say. Transgender and gender diverse students face daily challenges outside of the vocal studio. From microaggressions like dead naming and misgendering to threats and acts of violence. It's our duty as educators to be aware of how societal and workplace culture reinforces the gender binary. Even vocal types are separated by gender. Words like soprano, alto, tenor, and baritone are inherently gendered. Choirs or ensembles are often split by men and women, and terminology like falsetto is used gender exclusively. Unfortunately, I see it happen far too often where teachers get stuck in these binary traditions and end up discouraging students to continue with their art because these students just don't feel welcomed. We are in a really exciting period right now where we're seeing more and more gender diverse casting both locally and internationally. In the 2018 premiere of Head Over Heels, Broadway finally saw their first openly transgender woman, Peppermint, originate a principal role. Closer to home, the 2022 production of Priscilla at the Star featured transgender performer Yvonne Britton in the role of Bernadette. There's also been increasing cross-gendered casting. The recent Australian tour of Hadestown featured Christine Anu as Hermes, and overseas, Jesus Christ Superstar at the Hollywood Bowl featured Cynthia Erivo in the role of Jesus. With all this exciting opportunity and visibility on the rise, I think it's time us vocal educators caught up and helped to nurture our students for exactly who they are, don't you? Next, we'll be taking a look at how transition can affect the voice and how a singing teacher's approach can have a really significant impact on the singer. As any singing teacher or singer can attest to, we work with a very personal instrument. A person's voice is deeply tied to their self-expression and identity, and our students place a lot of trust in us to guide them safely, not just physically, but also emotionally. A study by Fletcher et al. In 2023 found that for both musical theatre and classical singing teachers, higher levels of empathy and positive feedback given by the teacher to the student makes a significant impact on the student's success and achievements. With this kind of data, it's clear that the process of vocal learning is not just a mechanical one, it's a deeply emotional one. Vocal goals will be different for each person. Just because someone is transgender does not automatically mean that they'll want to change anything about the way their voice sounds. But then there are also people who experience a degree of gender dysphoria because their voice doesn't match their desired gender perception. For these people, there are a few gender-affirming care options that they may consider. Ideally, any transgender or gender-diverse person who wants to change the way their voice sounds should be working with a gender-affirming speech pathologist on voice feminization or masculinization therapy. The speech path will work with them on pitch modulation, resonance training, articulation, and intonation for their everyday speech. It's in everyone's best interest to be working together and communicating as a voice team. This makes sure the student doesn't receive conflicting information about the next best step for their voice. If the student wants to change their voice further from here, they may decide to pursue either hormone treatment for masculinization or vocal feminization surgeries. When a person starts taking testosterone, their body goes through a process very similar to a testosterone-dominant puberty. This stimulates the growth of cartilage and muscle, making the larynx grow slightly larger, lengthening and thickening the vocal folds, which results in a deeper, more masculine-sounding voice. If a person is wanting to head towards a more feminine sound, unfortunately, hormones aren't going to have any feminizing effect on the voice. So they can work with the speech path as mentioned earlier, or they may decide to seek out voice feminization surgery, otherwise known as phonosurgery. During this surgery, the vocal folds are shortened and thinned to create a permanently higher pitch. It is amazing the things that modern surgery is capable of. Learning to adapt to a new voice is not without its challenges, so our role here as the singing teacher is to stay adaptable and to communicate with the student. Just like working with any student, the goal is to find exercises and techniques that produce healthy, sustainable, and authentic vocal production. I am so excited to introduce you all to our podcast guest today. Mikey Searle is a very talented musical theatre performer here in Brisbane, and I had the pleasure of interviewing him backstage at a recent production of All Shook Up that we were in together. Without further ado, here are some highlights from our chat together. I hope you enjoy. Welcome, Mikey, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So good to have you here. I would love if we could start by you just telling us a bit about yourself and your journey as a singer.
So hello, my name is Mikey. My pronouns are he, him. So I am a trans man, and for my voice journey, I have basically gone from being a soprano to being a baritone. So I've gone through every single voice type that you could ever imagine. I've been there at one point or another. It used to be very, very high, but it is completely dropped with the joys of hormones and all that fun stuff.
How has your relationship with your voice evolved through the transition? Do you feel like you now have a greater sense of connection to your voice?
100% have a lot greater of a connection in comparison to before I was on hormones and before all of my voice dropped. I didn't enjoy my voice very much before I started hormones, but it has made me feel so much more connected with myself. It's made acting and singing and stuff a lot easier and a lot more confident for me. I didn't enjoy who I was beforehand, but now that I'm so much more comfortable in it, I've been able to actually work on it and not feel an overwhelming sense of panic and stress with working on my voice, so it's made it 10 times easier. Very rewarding for me, which has been fantastic.
What advice would you give to transgender people who are considering a performance career, whether it's for a hobby or for money, who are in the early stages of figuring out their identity, maybe they're transitioning? Do you have any advice for those people?
Don't let your transition stop you. You're still, regardless of where you're at in your transition, regardless of whether you're in the beginning or quote unquote later stages, it doesn't matter. You're still a performer at the end of the day. For your trans masks, I would definitely do your best to keep training while your voice is dropping. I see a lot of stuff online where trans masks will go, oh, well, testosterone destroyed my singing voice. That's not the case. It absolutely isn't. You just have to keep working on it. It's a muscle. You just need to keep working on that muscle. It's just going to change and it's going to be slightly different, and that's okay. It's just working on it, building it up, and making sure it's healthy vocally, but also that you feel confident in it.
That's a really good point, that even if maybe you've gone on testosterone because you want some of those changes, it may still feel uncomfortable while they're happening. What advice would you give to singing teachers to make sure they're creating a safe, inclusive space?
I think the most important thing is being open. It shouldn't be a, no, you can't do this because it's not in your range, or no, we can't do this because you don't fit that cast type. There's a certain line where it really shouldn't matter. It should be, okay, well, how can we work around this? How can we do this so it's in your voice and you're comfortable and you're singing healthily and all of that sort of stuff? I think it's just important to know that trans performers are around. We always have been. We always will be. We're not going anywhere. And we do have a space in this theatre just as much as any other cis person does in a theatre setting. We're all hardworking. We all love to do what we do, and we're all here doing what we love for a reason. And we shouldn't be held back just because of our transness. It's just a part of us, and it should just be normal, because that's what it is at the end of the day. It's just normal.
I love that so much. Thank you, Mikey.
Anytime.
For coming on. This has been so lovely. Thank you again, Mikey, for coming on the podcast. I'll link his Instagram in the show notes so you can check out some of his stuff, maybe go see some of his shows. He's very talented, and I'm so stoked that I was able to interview him. So you're probably thinking to yourself, that's great, Hannah. I've learned a bunch about transgender voices, but how do I actually apply that to my lessons? We're getting there, I promise. The good news is you've already taken the first step on the way to creating a safe and productive environment for all singers just by listening to this podcast. So give yourself a little pat on the back, because you obviously have a curious mind and a desire to do better for your students. I would encourage you to stay open to further education from here and to check out some of the resources that you'll find in my show notes. Now, I'd like to introduce you to the concept of culturally responsive practice, or CRP for short. Simply put, CRP means we take the students' identifications, cultural perspectives, beliefs, and values into consideration in our teaching. It ensures our studio is a safe place where the student feels respected and empowered to pursue their goals, whatever they may be. As outlined in the Voice and Speech Review 2022, CRP involves 4 key steps for us as teachers. The first is cultural humility. With this, you don't assume that you know anything about a student just because of an identity label. You stay genuinely curious, ask respectful questions, and most importantly, listen. This could look like having a really solid intake form or an orientation lesson where you ask them things like their preferred name and their pronouns. Second is self-awareness. This can be a really uncomfortable part of the process. Looking inward and owning your own biases and cultural blind spots so that they don't pop up in the studio. Third, cultural knowledge. This means doing your own homework. It's not the student's job to educate the teacher on gender diversity during the lesson that they've paid you for. We need to do our own research to be informed so we can maximize their lesson time. And finally, reciprocity. This can be done by working with the student to create a plan that aligns with their personal goals, not the goals that we might have for them. It keeps the student, their unique voice and needs as the focus of the lesson. This could look like asking them what they want their voice to sound like or what repertoire is appealing to them. Here's a quick list of steps you can take to ensure gender-inclusive training. Introduce yourself with your pronouns. Ask a singer what they want their voice to sound like. Be open to changing the key of a song. Avoid negative language such as voice break. And finally, using gender-neutral language. I want to talk specifically about this in regards to vocal registrations. Terminology like head voice and falsetto are unnecessarily gendered and inaccurate descriptions of what's actually happening. I would thoroughly encourage you to switch to the gender-neutral laryngeal mechanisms descriptors. This describes vocal registrations by the relationship between the body and cover of the vocal folds and the degree of vocal fold closure. I won't go into more detail about this today because that could be a whole episode in itself, but I highly recommend reading Chapman and Morris's Singing and Teaching Singing for more details. At the start of this episode, I asked you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 on how confident you are teaching transgender students. Double check that score now. Has it gone up at all? I know mine has, so I hope yours has as well. And if it has, I am so excited for this new world that has just opened up for you. As teachers, we don't need to have all the answers, but we do need to be willing to learn. Every student we teach, regardless of gender, is individual and has their own vocal needs and goals. As it turns out, there is no separate technique for transgender singers, but the aim of lessons should be the same as for any of our other students: healthy singing and artistic authenticity. I want to thank you so much for taking this opportunity to learn and to encourage you that if you have any questions, you are welcome to leave a comment and I'll do my best to help clarify. If you found this podcast helpful or enlightening, please feel free to share it with a friend. And thank you again to Mikey for coming on the podcast. Your insight was invaluable. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Studio to Stage podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Look after yourself and we will talk again very soon. Happy singing!